The air in the Ascension Tower lobby was crisp, filtered, and expensive, smelling faintly of activated charcoal and high-end espresso. It was a space designed to exude wealth and urgency. In this gleaming, silent landscape, Mr. Chen was a ghost. His faded blue janitorial uniform was a glaring contrast to the slick, dark surfaces of steel and glass he polished with ritualistic, weary care. Though he was in his late 50s, he moved with a subtle precision, every swipe of his cloth calibrated, ensuring he remained invisible to the titans of industry who strode past. He was currently maneuvering his bulky cart around the cafe area, trying to navigate the complex seating arrangement without disturbing the lunchtime patrons. Stretched out across a leather banquet, his attention glued to a $3,000 gaming laptop, was Brandon. The 17-year-old was the entitled son of a high-level executive in the tower, using the high-end cafe as his personal, loud study space. His expensive sneakers were carelessly hooked around a chair leg, blocking the narrow passage. Mr. Chen tried to squeeze past, but the wheel of his cart caught Brandon's carelessly positioned chair. The chair scraped violently across the marble, the table wobbled, and a glass of half-drunk iced matcha latte pitched over, splashing its cooling green contents across the laptop's keyboard and Brandon's wrist. The music instantly cut out. Brandon stared at the spill, then up at the janitor, his face tightening with a sudden, ugly fury that had nothing to do with a spilled drink. "Are you kidding me right now?" Brandon's voice was high-pitched with outrage. Mr. Chen bowed slightly, pulling a dry rag from his cart immediately. "Ah, so sorry, sir. My mistake. I clean it up now, okay?" The apology was immediate and earnest, but the thick, rolling "on," "sorry," and the choppy, slightly halting rhythm of his speech hit Brandon like a trigger. The real offense, to the teenager, wasn't the spill, it was the sound of the apology. Brandon snatched his phone and hit record, his face splitting into a cruel, sneering smile. "Listen to that. Did you guys hear that? Say it again, Grandpa. Say, 'I clean it up now,' one more time." Brandon started mimicking, drawing out the vowel sounds, waving his hands in a crude, mocking gesture that drew the attention of the few suited patrons in the cafe. "Solely. I queen dis all up. Seriously, is this the level of service my father pays for? You can't even speak English, old man." The few people who watched immediately looked down at their phones, pretending to scroll through market data, trying not to be associated with the escalating nastiness. Behind the espresso machine, Maya, the soft-spoken barista, gripped the steam wand so tightly her knuckles were white. She knew Mr. Chen was meticulous and quiet, and that Brandon was an absolute nightmare of privilege, but the paralyzing fear of losing her job, her only way to save for college, kept her head down, silent, and trapped. Mr. Chen straightened up. The initial anxiety was gone, replaced by an unsettling calm. He simply moved the laptop aside, ignoring the camera pointed at his face, and meticulously cleaned the sticky mess. He didn't look at Brandon or the phone recording his every move. The pain of the verbal abuse was a familiar, decades-old weight, a subtle reminder of why he'd adopted the mask years ago. When the area was spotless, he gave one final, almost profound bow, ignoring Brandon's continued, sneering commentary about incompetent foreigners. Brandon stopped recording, satisfied. He checked the video's upload status, adding the caption, "Hilarious janitor fail," and strode out, a casual victor in a battle that only he cared about. Mr. Chen returned to polishing the brass railing, his movements now a little slower, the flicker of deep-seated purpose behind his eyes burning just a little brighter. He had assessed his opponent, and the test was over. 15 years earlier, the light inside the high-security Silicon Valley auditorium was blinding white, reflecting off the polished concrete floor. At the center of the stage, Dr. Jian Chen stood confidently, effortlessly delivering a keynote address. His suit was razor-sharp, his charisma magnetic, and his English was flawless, carrying the precise, unaccented cadence of an MIT graduate. He spoke passionately about his creation, a revolutionary AI, not designed for warfare or finance, but for ethical, global supply chain logistics. He was an architect, building a better, fairer world through technology. He was, quite literally, a legend in the making. But legends can be betrayed. The scene fractured. A rapid series of cuts showed the brutal downfall. A handshake agreement dissolving into a blur of legal papers. His trusted business partner, a man he considered family, smugly walking away with the core code. The swift, devastating realization that his technology was immediately repurposed for unethical corporate exploitation, ruining thousands of small businesses globally for massive, immoral profits. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was existential. The weight of his own creation being used for corruption forced Dr. Chen underground. He had to disappear, to become a ghost, not just to hide from those who might try to silence him, but to slowly, meticulously rebuild the entire structure of justice. The janitor uniform became his shield, the thick accent his sword. It was a self-imposed crucible. The deliberate linguistic struggle was a way to filter the world, to force people to look past the superficial and see character. Anyone who mocked his perceived weakness failed the test. Anyone who treated him with simple kindness, regardless of his status, passed. Back in the present, the sound of Mr. Chen's scrubbing brush against the brass nameplate of a prestigious new finance firm, Quantum Leap Capital, was the only thing breaking the hush of the ninth-floor corridor. He was polishing the plaque to a mirror shine, watching his own tired reflection distort on the curved metal. He had tracked this name, this company, for years. He knew its true, corrosive lineage. A pair of impossibly expensive heels clicked down the hallway. It was Mrs. Albright, sharp, immaculate, and radiating expensive disdain. She stopped near Mr. Chen to finish a call on her Bluetooth headset. Her perfume was overpowering, a stark, chemical contrast to the faint industrial scent of Mr. Chen's cleaning supplies. She rolled her eyes, not even glancing at the janitor, and spoke into the air. Honestly, Jerry, the sanitation costs this quarter are egregious. I'm telling you, the quality of the staff we're paying for is appalling. She paused, listening to the response, then lowered her voice slightly. Yes, I know the acquisition is priority. It's moving forward perfectly. Finalizing all the legacy accounts today. The entire board is flying in next week. Once this Quantum Leap merger is done, we'll control the entire Pacific Rim logistics network. It's huge, Jerry. Absolutely huge. The words, Quantum Leap Capital, and legacy accounts, hit Mr. Chen like a physical blow, snapping his mind back to the sterile lab and the taste of betrayal. This was it. The final stage of the corrupt financial group he'd hunted was consolidating power right under his feet. Mrs. Albright, Brandon's mother, he realized with a sharp, sickening jolt, was a high-ranking executive in the very operation he was trying to dismantle. He slowly finished polishing the brass, his movements now charged with deadly focus. The cold, heavy nameplate was no longer just a cleaning task. It was the final, critical piece of evidence in a 15-year case. He lowered his head and pushed his cart away, the silent promise of retribution now settled, heavy and firm, in his quiet heart. The storm, initiated by Brandon's petty cruelty, escalated quickly into a force directed by corporate malice. Brandon's viral video, featuring the mocking mimicry of Mr. Chen, had racked up hundreds of thousands of views and accompanying derogatory comments. The public humiliation now reflected badly on the Ascension Tower's carefully curated image. Mrs. Albright, spotting the viral janitor in her own lobby, used the scandal as leverage. She didn't care about public relations, she cared about power. Her son's embarrassment, in her mind, was solely the fault of the low-life who dared to exist in their sphere. That afternoon, she walked into building security with the cold, controlled air of a prosecuting attorney. She demanded swift, preemptive action to eliminate the risk. The direct attack came 20 minutes later. Mr. Chen was performing his final midday sweep of the executive floor, his mind already calculating the next move against Quantum Leap Capital. He hadn't noticed Mrs. Albright swiftly drop a thin, metallic object, a prototype security key for a sensitive server room, into the recycling bin of his cleaning cart as she passed. Suddenly, two large men in dark security uniforms appeared. Mr. Chen, we need you to step aside. We're conducting a routine inventory search. The supervisor, a nervous man named Dave, wouldn't meet Mr. Chen's eyes. A small crowd began to gather, brokers, assistants, and executives heading out for lunch. Mrs. Albright watched from a nearby balcony, sipping sparkling water, her expression satisfied. Dave motioned to the cart. "Open the recycling bin, please." Mr. Chen, mystified, unhooked the bin. Dave plunged his hand inside, rooting through the wadded-up paper towels and discarded coffee cups. He pulled out the keycard, holding it up like damning evidence. "This is a level 6 security prototype. Why is this in your cart, Mr. Chen?" Mr. Chen's heart sank, not from panic, but from the sudden, sharp realization that the game had changed from corporate espionage to personal sabotage. I not see this. I don't know where it come from," he insisted, his thick accent making his denial sound suspicious and fragmented to the onlookers. "Oh, come on, Dave," Mrs. Albright called down with a loud, theatrical sigh, ensuring her voice carried. "He's clearly lying. He doesn't even have the vocabulary to form a proper alibi. Get him out of here before he sells company secrets to the competition." Mr. Chen tried to protest, his words tumbling out in a rush of broken English. "Is wrong. Is lie. I work hard, sir. I not take." He felt the familiar weight of being utterly invisible and unheard. No one believed him. They saw the uniform, they heard the accent, and the case was closed. Down in the lobby cafe, Maya, finishing her shift, saw the commotion. She watched, horrified, as Mr. Chen was marched through the main entrance. But just before they reached the revolving doors, she saw Mrs. Albright descend from the balcony, a self-satisfied smirk plastered across her face. And then, Maya remembered. Earlier, she had seen Mrs. Albright stop right by the cart, pretending to tie her shoe, before the security team arrived. The truth was an undeniable, bitter taste in Maya's mouth. Mr. Chen was pushed out into the afternoon sunlight. He stumbled slightly, then steadied himself. As he turned to face the tower one last time, his eyes met Maya's, standing frozen behind the glass doors. He saw the terror in her face, but also the flicker of guilty recognition. In that brief, silent moment, he didn't accuse her of silence. Instead, he gave her a swift, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of acknowledgement and perhaps a challenge. It was over. He was fired, publicly disgraced, and framed. The enemy thought they had won, successfully eliminating the low-life risk. But Mr. Chen was already shifting his mind from the tactical retreat of the janitor to the strategic offensive of the legend. The sun was low, casting long, defeated shadows across the small park bench where Mr. Chen sat. The public humiliation, the false accusation, the loss of his cover, it all culminated here, feeling like a heavy, final blow. He looked like any other tired, working-class man who had just lost his livelihood. He pulled out a worn, old-model flip phone, a deliberate piece of ancient tech he used for its sheer simplicity, and stared at a cryptic contact labeled, "The Advocate." He murmured to himself, the sound almost a breath, his voice now entirely free of the clumsy, thick accent. It was the precise, resonant tone of an academic. The mask served its purpose. They think the janitor is broken, defeated. They think they won a small victory. They have no idea they just gave the architect unrestricted access. He placed the old phone back into his coat pocket. Then, from the bottom of his faded cleaning log binder, the only item security hadn't confiscated, he slid out a paper-thin, military-grade encrypted tablet. The light reflecting off its surface held the cold sheen of focused intelligence. His fingers danced across the screen with practiced, incredible speed, navigating complex network infrastructure schematics. This was the midpoint twist. The false defeat had merely been the catalyst. Mr. Chen wasn't simply a man who was wronged, he was Dr. Jian Chen, and his long-range surveillance had just confirmed the final, damning piece of leverage. The tablet displayed a critical network map. Quantum Leap Capital, Mrs. Albright's firm, was completely reliant on a foundational AI engine, the very legacy code Dr. Chen had created 15 years prior, and which still contained a meticulously placed, proprietary backdoor. He didn't need to steal the keycard, he owned the very infrastructure. His mindset shifted instantly from defensive concealment to aggressive deployment. Getting fired had given him the perfect alibi. The media would focus on the disgraced janitor, never noticing the quiet, devastating corporate maneuver about to take place. He was no longer the victim of a bully, he was the planner, initiating a long-delayed, hostile passive takeover. He picked up the flip phone again and dialed the advocate, speaking now in clear, unaccented Mandarin, then seamlessly switching to flawless, corporate English. Activate Protocol 7. Hostile tender offer. Use the shell structures. I want all consolidation finalized within 3 days, maximum anonymity. And make sure the legal team is ready to trigger the fraud investigation the moment I signal. Tell them, the game is over. Meanwhile, back in the Ascension Tower, Maya was pacing restlessly in the cafe utility closet. The memory of Mr. Chen's quiet nod and Mrs. Albright's sneer was a burning accusation. She knew the silence was collaboration. Trembling, she pulled out her own phone. She couldn't give her name, but she typed a frantic, anonymous message to the building's ethics hotline, hinting at executive interference and planted evidence. Her courage was a tiny candle flickering in the wind, but it was an invisible piece of the puzzle Dr. Chen needed. As Mr. Chen stood up from the park bench, he performed one last act of discarding his identity. He walked directly to a high-end tailor shop known only to the city's elite. The tailor, seeing the faded uniform, looked skeptical until Mr. Chen handed him a small, plain card, an exclusive pass granted only to the firm's most valued, secret clients. Inside the shop, the janitor uniform was exchanged for the cold, unyielding weight of bespoke wool. The legend was stepping back into the light, ready to orchestrate the most satisfying corporate takedown the city had ever seen. The penthouse safe house was silent, bathed in the cool blue glow of multiple monitors. Gone was the janitor, replaced by Dr. Chen, the formidable architect. He moved through the space with an almost surgical efficiency, reviewing legal documents and market reports. He wore a crisp, tailored shirt, a symbol of the control he had regained. His process was not rushed. It was a slow, detailed grind of financial maneuvering, each transaction a quiet hammer blow against the empire he was dismantling. He was setting a trap built of patience and numbers. Meanwhile, Mrs. Albright was basking in the glow of her supposed victory. She accepted a heavy, crystal plaque at an internal company luncheon, celebrated for her commitment to risk mitigation and decisive action, a thinly veiled reference to the public removal of Mr. Chen. She smiled smugly, convinced she had reinforced the necessary hierarchy. Honestly, Brandon, you taught that janitor a lesson, she told her son that evening over a decadent, multi-course meal. Some people need to understand where they belong. The building feels cleaner already. Brandon, pleased with his mother's approval, scrolled through comments on his viral video, laughing at the derogatory reactions. He saw himself as a cultural commentator, completely unaware that his momentary cruelty had triggered the collapse of his family's entire financial structure. Subtle hints of the turning tide began to appear, noticeable only to the few who paid attention. Maya, still working the cafe counter, noticed a sleek, midnight black sedan parked outside the tower every day at the same time. One afternoon, she saw the manager, the man who had scolded and then fired Mr. Chen, get into the car, his face pale and strained. He emerged a few minutes later, quickly stuffing a thick, unmarked envelope into his jacket pocket. It was his severance, a silent settlement from the holding company that now owned the building. Dr. Chen initiated the final technical step of his trap. He used his legacy AI backdoor to place an encrypted call to the chief technology officer of Quantum Leap Capital. He adopted his most labored, thick accent once more, deliberately making the technical request sound confusing and irritatingly trivial, a supposed, minor legacy system ping. Yes. Yes, drive. Chen stammered on the call, the accent heavy. I need you to, please, send the data ping to the, 47B server. Is important for, system check. The CTO, annoyed at the struggle to understand the incompetent caller, barked, Look, I don't care about your ping. Just send the data, whatever you need, and don't call this line again. He hung up, dismissing the request instantly. He didn't realize that by granting access to the 47B server, he had just granted Dr. Chen the final, administrative lock on the company's entire legacy financial database. That night, Mrs. Albright and her husband were discussing a new luxury yacht over cocktails. Once the merger finalizes, we're moving to the Hamptons, darling, she cooed, her eyes glittering with greed. That little incident with the janitor was the last speck of dust we had to deal with. It's clear sailing now. The only dust left was the meticulously calculated financial fallout swirling around their heads. An hour later, a heavy, gold-embossed invitation arrived at Mrs. Albright's desk. It was for the Celebration of Synergy Gala, the event designed to be her crowning moment. Dr. Chen received an identical invitation in his safe house. He smoothed the paper with one finger, his expression cold and resolved. He would be attending, not as a witness, but as the executioner. The silent preparation was complete. The grand ballroom of the Ascension Tower was unrecognizable. Tonight, it was a cathedral of finance, bathed in the warmth of crystal chandeliers, filled with the murmuring din of high-stakes networking. This was the Celebration of Synergy Gala, the final sealing of the merger. Every glass surface gleamed, every table setting shimmered, and the atmosphere was thick with money and self-congratulation. Mrs. Albright and Brandon arrived late, making a calculated entrance. Mrs. Albright was draped in a designer gown and diamonds, her face radiating the expectation of applause. Brandon, in a tailored tuxedo that barely concealed his cocky swagger, was at her side, basking in the reflected glory. They moved through the crowd like royalty, accepting compliments on the brilliant closure of the deal. Maya was there too, wearing the stiff, black uniform of the catering staff. Her team was assigned to the high-visibility area near the champagne fountain. She kept her head down, pouring drinks with practiced anonymity, trying to ignore the proximity of Mrs. Albright. But Brandon, ever the bully, couldn't resist a final taunt. He approached Maya, leaning in with a condescending smirk. "Look who's still here," he drawled, taking a flute of champagne from her tray. "Serving drinks. You should really think about a better career path. You know, something with better tips. Unlike that embarrassing janitor we had, who probably couldn't even afford the bus fare home." Maya flinched, but kept her voice level. "I'm working hard, Brandon." "No, you're serving hard," he corrected, laughing. "There's a difference. People like us celebrate, people like you clean up the mess." He walked away, leaving Maya trembling, the glass she held almost slipping from her grasp. Then, the murmuring shifted, a subtle ripple of genuine curiosity moving through the crowd. Dr. Chen entered the ballroom. He was dressed in a perfectly cut, midnight blue suit that didn't scream wealth, but whispered power. His presence was quiet, controlled, and utterly unlike the desperate janitor. He walked not with the hurried anxiety of a worker, but with the steady pace of an owner. Mrs. Albright's head snapped up. Her smile dissolved instantly, replaced by a mask of disbelief and rising rage. She abandoned her conversation and marched toward him, her heels clicking aggressively on the marble. "You, how dare you trespass here?" she hissed, keeping her voice low but venomous. "You were fired. I had you removed for theft. Did you steal an invitation too, you pathetic man?" Dr. Chen turned to her, a faint, almost pitying smile touching his lips. He used the slightest trace of his old accent, just enough to fuel her prejudice. "I am an investor," he replied calmly. Mrs. Albright laughed, a brittle, harsh sound that turned heads. "An investor? Get real, Dave. Security," she called out, but no one immediately responded. The building's security team was mysteriously absent. The tension was palpable. Maya watched from the service station, her heart pounding. She saw Mrs. Albright's genuine hatred and fear that the janitor had somehow found a way back into her world. Maya took a deep breath, and for the first time, she took a step. "Mrs. Albright," Maya said, her voice surprisingly clear, forcing the executive to turn around. "You need to stop. I saw what you did with the keycard." The effect was instantaneous. The surrounding conversation ceased. Mrs. Albright's face went white, then mottled red. "What is this? A disgruntled catering girl? This is absurd. Someone remove this trash, she shrieked, instantly focusing her fury on the lower-level target. The sheer audacity of the accusation momentarily diverted the crowd's attention from Dr. Chen. The CEO of Quantum Leap Capital, oblivious to the side drama, tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we're ready for the announcement. Dr. Chen, watching Maya's brave but futile intervention, simply gave the young woman another silent nod, a silent acknowledgement of her truth. Then, he moved forward, taking a seat at a table precisely 3 rows from the stage, prepared to deliver the final, devastating performance. The lights dimmed as Mr. Sterling, the CEO of Quantum Leap, took center stage, gripping the podium with confident hands. The room fell into a respectful silence, punctuated only by the clinking of silverware. Sterling launched into his speech, his voice booming with forced enthusiasm about future synergies and unprecedented growth. Mrs. Albright stood a few rows back, still vibrating with frustrated anger from her exchange with the former janitor and the little barista. She elbowed Brandon, who was smugly filming the stage. That menace needs to be removed after the announcement, she muttered, her eyes narrowed at Dr. Chen, who was sitting, perfectly still, watching Sterling with detached interest. Sterling reached the climax of his announcement, raising his arms in triumph. And so, I am proud to formally announce that Quantum Leap has been successfully acquired. This marks a new era of justice, perhaps, a deep, clear voice cut through the applause, sharp as a diamond cutting glass. Every head swiveled. Dr. Chen rose slowly from his chair. The man who stood now bore no resemblance to the tired janitor struggling with a heavy accent. His posture was upright, his gaze piercing, and his presence commanded the room. Sterling, annoyed by the interruption, squinted. I'm sorry, sir, but you need to sit down. Who invited you? Dr. Chen walked toward the stage, his steps measured and deliberate. His voice, now completely unaccented, carried a cold, authoritative resonance that silenced the entire ballroom. I invited myself, Mr. Sterling. You see, I am not merely an investor. I am the new majority shareholder. As of 10 minutes ago, I finalized the tender offer and acquired your company. A collective gasp swept through the room, like a sudden drop in air pressure. Sterling's face was a study in profound confusion and denial. That's impossible. We verified the shareholder records this morning. The purchasing firm was a shell entity in Singapore. A shell firm created by my team, Dr. Chen confirmed, climbing onto the stage. He took the microphone from Sterling's stunned hand. You were correct to see me as a janitor, Mr. Sterling. After all, I spent 15 years meticulously cleaning up the mess you and your associates created. He looked directly at Mrs. Albright, whose expensive makeup couldn't hide the toxic, sudden drain of color from her face. Brandon's video recording stuttered to a halt as his hand began to shake uncontrollably. Mrs. Albright, Dr. Chen continued, his eyes hard. You correctly identified me as Mr. Chen, a Chinese man. What you failed to recognize is Dr. Jian Chen, the founder and sole owner of the original intellectual property upon which this company was built. You stole my creation 15 years ago, you built an unethical empire on it, and then, most recently, you tried to frame me for theft because my accent annoyed your entitled son. The word accent hung in the air, a devastating realization of the petty crime that had brought down a giant. Brandon, standing next to his mother, stammered, No way. That was you? The guy with the accent? Dr. Chen finished, a cruel edge to his voice. The accent was a test, son. You failed, miserably. Mrs. Albright's composure finally shattered. She screamed, You can't do this. You don't have the authority. I'm an executive. I demand you prove this. Dr. Chen smiled, a genuine, chilling smile that reached his eyes. He raised the sleek tablet he had concealed in his suit jacket pocket. Proof is redundant, Mrs. Albright. You see, when I was checking the system ping yesterday, the call your CTO dismissed, I took administrative control of the financial ledger. And what I found, he paused dramatically, looking out at the stunned crowd, was not just massive corporate fraud and corruption dating back 15 years, but a very convenient paper trail proving you planted that keycard in my trash bin this morning." A loud, clear siren wailed outside the tower. The heavy doors of the ballroom burst open, and uniformed federal agents flooded the room. Dr. Chen gestured toward Mrs. Albright. "I believe the authorities are here for you, Mrs. Albright. You should have treated the janitor with respect. Because, as you now know, that janitor was a legend." Mrs. Albright's screams of outrage and denial were sharp, grating sounds that echoed off the high ceiling, but they quickly faded beneath the official, calm urgency of the federal agents. 2 agents moved to handcuff her, their presence lending an undeniable finality to the shocking reveal. Her designer gown seemed to shrink around her, and the diamonds on her wrists suddenly looked like shackles. Brandon stood frozen, watching the downfall of his entire, cushioned existence. The smirk was long gone, replaced by a hollow, sickening realization. He was utterly humiliated, not by an old man with a funny accent, but by the weight of his own family's corruption and his own viral cruelty. He looked at his mother being led away, then at the ballroom full of staring faces, people who had only minutes ago admired them, and finally, his eyes dropped to the floor, heavy with regret. The shame was a physical ache, a searing pain where arrogance had once resided. Dr. Chen watched the departure of the villain, the satisfaction deep, but quiet. The roar of the crowd, the shocked whispers of the executives, it all dissolved into background noise. His work was not yet finished. He stepped down from the stage, walking past the stunned crowd until he reached the champagne station. Maya, the barista, was standing absolutely still, her hands clasped tightly, tears of overwhelming relief and awe streaming down her face. She had witnessed the miracle of justice served. Dr. Chen approached her softly. "Maya," he said, using her name with precise gentleness. She gasped, immediately wiping her eyes. "Dr. Chen, I'm so sorry. I wanted to speak up earlier, when they framed you. I knew I should have." Her voice broke. "Hush," he interrupted, his voice kind. He pulled a crisp, folded piece of paper from his pocket. It wasn't money, it was a letterhead. "You did speak up, Maya. You sent an anonymous tip to the ethics hotline. It was a risk you took when everyone else stayed silent. That is true character." Maya stared at the paper, confused. "I need people of character now," Dr. Chen explained. "I am launching a new initiative, built on the foundations of the ethical logistics AI always intended to build. This company needs clean slates, and clear voices." He extended the paper toward her. "This is an offer of a full 4-year scholarship to the university of your choice, tuition, books, and board paid for. And when you graduate, if you still want a job here, you'll start on the management track. Not because you were kind to a janitor, but because you stood up for the truth when it mattered most." Maya took the paper, her hands shaking. She didn't look at the corporate logo. She looked at Dr. Chen's eyes, seeing not the janitor, not the billionaire, but the mentor. "Thank you," she whispered, the gratitude choking her voice. "Thank you for showing us what respect looks like." Dr. Chen gave a final, warm smile. The fight was over, the system was being rebuilt, and the true legend was not the man who amassed billions, but the one who taught a simple, unforgettable lesson. Kindness is the only currency that truly matters. He turned, the suit and the power simply tools used for a righteous cause. He had traded his cleaning cart for the boardroom, proving that the most powerful thing anyone can possess is dignity,